Butterfield, are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?
I was aware of listening devices. Yes, sir.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading or streaming another episode of Wigs for Wigs. I'm Joe Cook, joined once again by Bill Venezia, and we are getting back to politics today because quite a bit's been happening in the political sphere. More and more people declaring their presidential campaigns. A couple more expected right on the horizon of the next week or so. And also there's been new news with the investigations into our former president, Donald Trump. There's been the debt ceiling negotiations going on in Congress. There's been quite a lot going on in the political sphere. So we're getting back into politics today. So welcome, Bill.
Joe, good to be with you. You brought to my attention, I heard bits and pieces of the testimony, I guess grand jury testimony regarding Donald Trump and what he did with some documents. I don't know everything, and honestly, I'm going to trust the print stuff when I go home and see what I can grab to further go through it. But I realize that the investigation by the special prosecutor has to be coming to some sort of conclusion soon with regard to this. But it'd be interesting to see if, in fact, he gets charged with, I think it's a RICO conspiracy, which would include not only seditious conspiracy, but also the Espionage Act, if in fact the reports are true. So,
yeah,
but that remains to be seen.
I think, and this is what I emailed you last night when this news was coming out about apparently, and we don't have the recording of the tape yet, but apparently there is this taped recording of Donald Trump meeting with people at his Bedminster Golf Club here in New Jersey, discussing a book that they were planning to write about Mark Meadows, these couple people that were visiting with him. And he was bragging or alluding to, in some way, this top secret Pentagon document that he had in his possession, revealing details about a planned invasion of Iran that he planned to somehow use. This is what, again, what news agencies have pieced together, because we don't have the actual recording yet, but from, leaks of testimony and all, that he was planning to use in some way to kind of undermine Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who at that time there was a brand new article in the New York Times or the New Yorker, I don't remember which publication it was, about Mark Milley. This was months after Trump left office. There were all these articles and books coming out about the last months of Trump's presidency. And the latest thing was that Milley had talked Trump out of an attack on Iran. And Trump wanted to use this to say, well, Mark Milley had his own plans to attack Iran, so it wasn't me. That's kind of what's been pieced together from this story so far. But if that's true, it reveals a few things, all of which undercut Donald Trump legally in some way. One is that allegedly, again, we don't have this tape. I'm looking forward to getting it, hopefully. Trump acknowledges in this conversation that the document he has is still classified, that he can't share it with the people. He would like to share it with the people that he's meeting with there, but he can't because it's still classified. And that he says there are limits to what I can do as a former president in terms of declassifying things. So that would undercut this whole argument he's made that everything he brought with him to his private residences, Mar-a-Lago, Bedminster, wherever it might be, were automatically declassified. That's one of the legal defenses that he's been putting out there, that all these things were declassified because he took them with them, and he had this standing order that if he took something with him, it was declassified. That apparently, again, we don't have the tape yet, but we might soon, is completely undercut by this tape, where he acknowledges this is still classified and there's nothing I can do about it. Two, this shows that he was actively planning to potentially use classified information to undercut and undermine an active agent of the U.S. government, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and by extension of that, the U.S. military.
You know, Joe, if you...
That is the Sedition Act.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely the Sedition Act. But if you go back in time, and the biggest fear that I think people had just as the run-up to the election, that there would be some sort of engagement against Iran, and that was rumored. Now, I am sure that the president directed Milley as the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to come up with
Draw up a
plans.
plan, right? I mean, that's what you would do as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And thank God Milley had...
That doesn't mean it was Milley's idea to attack Iran.
No,
That means...
it was Trump's idea. It was sort of wag the dog, to sustain him in office, given the fact that if he did go down in the election, that he could hold on to power, because think of the chaos that would have been caused by an invasion of Iran, and think about the unsettling nature.
Right. I'm not saying this was a good plan by Trump to undermine General Milley.
No.
I think it falls apart logically because of what you just said.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean that wasn't his plan to try to do this.
Of course not. And I have to tell you that I totally believe that there were communications with the Saudis and the Israelis about this. So I'm sure that he basically had conversation with them about it, because you know who would be pushing for an invasion of Iran. Saudi Arabia wanted to wipe out its neighbor, and so did Israel. Yes.
Rival who it sees as expanding its power into Iraq and all that.
And please, with the coziness between the Saudis and Jared Kushner and Donald Trump, I'm sure that this was discussed, and with Bibi Netanyahu also.
Well, we also know, and again, it was different because he was president at the time that this happened, that a president essentially can choose to declassify things. I'm not challenging that idea that a president can declassify things. There is a process for that. But remember, I don't know if you remember, the Israeli intelligence agencies were not happy with Donald Trump because he very clearly revealed sources and methods
to the Russians.
In
the Oval Office.
In the Oval Office, right. That he revealed Israeli intelligence gathering to the Russians when he was president. Talk about Donald Trump wasn't coordinating with the Russians. I mean, give me a break. But we know that he was willing to show classified information to people who probably shouldn't have seen it, even when he was president. Let alone when he's an ex-president with no right at all to reveal that stuff to anybody. At all, legally.
Well,
he had no right to have any of these documents anymore. That's the Presidential Records Act. It's very clear. There's no legal debate about the Presidential Records Act.
You mean you can't think it and it declassifies instantaneously?
But even if it was, it's a crime because he wasn't entitled to have those documents anymore. It's a lesser crime. It's not the Espionage Act anymore, it's just him having them. But this latest revelation, if what the reporting has been turns out to be accurate, is such a smoking gun, I feel like, of all the pieces you have to put together to make the cases for both obstruction of justice and the much more serious violations of the Espionage Act. This shows that he knew he had classified documents, that they were still classified, and that he was willing to show them to people for his own purposes, potentially undermining an active person in the hierarchy of the U.S. government, the highest ranking military officer in the U.S., the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley.
Yes.
That is almost inconceivably proof of violations of all these laws that we've speculated he might be guilty of. If the reporting on this latest thing is true and accurate, that's it.
Well,
his defenders won't care. His supporters won't care. They'll still support him. As he said, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they wouldn't care, and that's proven to be true.
Joe, that's an interesting thought to pursue, the effect it's going to have on the GOP. Do you really think that this is not going to boost DeSantis's pursuit of the nomination?
It might. okay, let's take it this way. I'd say there's probably 35 to 40% of the Republican Party that is absolutely committed to Donald Trump. What would you put that number at? Of people who, no matter what, they are Trump supporters?
I think that's pretty fair assessment.
About a third,
I
right?
would
We'll say maybe in the 30s.
Yeah, I would say in the 30s.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they are, no matter what, they are going to vote for Donald Trump. So that means that with the way the Republican primaries work, because Republican primaries are all winner take all. Democratic primaries are different. There's proportional allocation of delegates, that if you get 30% of the votes in a primary, you get 30% of the delegates in that state. That's not the case on the Republican side. Everything is winner take all. Doesn't matter if you get 15% and you win the state, or you get 95% and you win the state. You get every delegate from that state. So if you have 35% of people in each state willing to vote for Donald Trump no matter what is happening with his legal problems, does Ron DeSantis get more than 35% in these states? Think about how many people are jumping into the Republican field all of a sudden.
No, this is
how Donald Trump got the nomination in 2016. He only got about 20% of the votes in many states, but because there were 21 people running in 2016, it diluted the rest of the vote, and he won every state, and he got the delegates.
Joe, this is how I see it. I think a very, very important person is coming into the race next week.
Chris Christie?
Chris Christie, and here's what Chris Christie is going to do. He has.
Are you not being sarcastic when
I'm
you
not
say
being.
Chris Christie?
I'm being. Yes, but here's why it's important. I do believe he will be the only person to take Trump on full front. Full frontal
You
assault.
think he's actually going to?
Yes, I do. And I do believe that it's going to do damage to Donald Trump. It will not bolster him. It will, in effect, bolster DeSantis. And if DeSantis can basically acquit himself the way he did in Iowa yesterday at 4 places, he'll do well, because Christie will basically do a hatchet job on Donald Trump. I do believe he's the only person in the Republican field that will take Trump on full force. I think that DeSantis will want to remain above the fray. I think the other candidates...
Yeah, he has more important enemies to deal with, like Disney.
The other candidate who's coming in next week will announce in Iowa...
He's our former
Christie's
vice
going to be
president.
the former vice president, and tell me what he's going to do or say. He's too civil a man to take on his former boss.
To take on the guy who tried to get him hanged.
And by the way, he won't
Put him and his family in danger.
Yeah, I mean...
What a family values Republican.
Everybody else is running for vice president, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's true.
Nikki Haley, whether that's
Scott.
Whether that's Asa Hutchinson, although he has stuck his head out of his shell to basically
I think he
criticize
just isn't
Donald
getting
Trump.
the microphone. I mean, I think
No, he's not.
he is an anti-Trumper.
Yes.
But he's been consistently an anti-Trumper.
Yeah, I don't even think he would accept it.
I don't think he's going to ever get the attention.
No.
And
Christie will.
I hate to say it again. I mean, those of you who listen to this podcast know I was a Republican for a long time. Pretty committed one. The Republican Party is not what it was when I considered myself a Republican. I'm an independent now.
Well, if you look at this...
I could vote for an Asa Hutchinson. I could vote for Tim Scott, who's a pretty traditional Republican in his actual views. But they're not going to have a chance in this primary.
No. I think...
They're not culture warriors, so they're not going to have a chance. That's the modern Republican Party, is this whole bullshit anti-woke thing that's going on.
I don't even know what woke means anymore.
Nobody does.
No.
It's just a catch-all term for anything you think is bad.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that no one talks the issues. No one talks the economy. No one talks about jobs. No one talks about the future.
No, 'cause what do they have to say about the economy and jobs?
It's all
Donald Trump lost more jobs than any president in history in the United States.
He also increased the deficit more than any president.
More than any president in history. Right, we have all this talk about the deficit now with the debt ceiling talks going on.
$8 trillion of it is due to
Crimea River. You people added to all that.
And the way they added to it was the revenue side of the budgets because of the Trump tax breaks in 2017.
My taxes went up under Donald Trump.
My taxes also went
up. I don't
up
make enough
under
money to
Trump.
qualify for a tax cut.
No, because the top 10% were the ones that reaped the benefits. I hate to say it.
That voodoo economics still hasn't worked.
It doesn't work.
That was George Bush Sr.'s term for it because he didn't believe in it.
That was Stockman.
Even if he made his pledge about no new taxes, which he broke then, which was the right thing to do, he didn't believe in it.
No.
Because it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know what works? The American dream and supporting the middle class. Now I'm sounding like a democratic socialist, but the truth of the matter is the more you do to support the middle class, you bring everybody up from the bottom and you bring the middle.
If you go back to Rockefeller Republicans, they believed in stuff like that. That's
absolutely.
It's not socialism. Well,
no, of course not. Of course not.
A pure definition of socialism it is, I guess.
Don't waive the anti-crime thing when you supported those people who attacked the Capitol and basically injured or killed Capitol policemen.
Yeah, don't tell me you support law enforcement. You're for law and order if you support the January 6th rioters and you want to pardon them. Don't tell me you support fiscal responsibility if you only want to give tax cuts to rich people. Don't tell me that you're against socialism, and you don't even know what socialism is, if your biggest thing as a governor is to go after the Disney Corporation.
You know what? In the National Socialist regime in the 1930s, that's what they did. They basically forced companies and corporations to basically bend to their will.
Because that's what socialism is.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. If in capitalism, that doesn't exist.
The government does not interfere with business in capitalism. Yeah. Leave businesses alone to do what they want to do. If Disney wants to follow a liberal agenda, that's their right as a private company.
Go back to Silent Cow. The business of America is business. But anyway.
Citizens United told us from a conservative majority that corporations are people. Therefore, they have the rights to express their personal views. And if Disney wants to be liberal, out of the control, wild, everybody be gay and everything, well, that's their right as a private entity to express their opinion on something. And it's not the government's job to tell them otherwise.
And as educators, I'm despondent over the books that are being banned by a narrow majority of people.
Oh, how about the banning of Amanda Gorman's poem from Joe Biden's inauguration?
It's despicable.
Because it teaches hate, apparently. How does that teach hate?
Or
we've all read it. We've used that poem. We played the inauguration when it happened because it was news. What in there teaches hate in any way?
Joe, there's nothing forward-thinking about any of this stuff. It's all a look back to the 1950s with this patina that basically says to everybody, white makes right.
Yeah, but they wouldn't even like it in the 1950s. They'd be accusing Dwight Eisenhower of being a communist. Well, they'd be John Birch society members, all these people, if you brought them back to the 1950s.
I'll give you that Eisenhower did see through the McCarthyism and the Birchers. He certainly did.
They would have supported Eisenhower sending troops to Little Rock to desegregate schools? No, there's no way these modern Republicans would have supported that.
That's why he stayed out of the civil rights issue. He didn't want his heart to completely blow out.
And they're not internationalists, these modern Republicans. They want us to have no involvement in Ukraine or anything. They would have supported Robert Taft if you brought them back to the 1950s, not Dwight Eisenhower.
If we do not support the Ukraine, they're so short-sighted to see. They don't study history. The next thing, the Chinese will be coming across to Taiwan. And the United States will be faced now what to do. Because if they see that sign of weakness or the resolve of the West with the Ukraine, who has...
if they see we're willing to just give up a friend to a dictator, then why wouldn't China invade Taiwan?
And we crumble from within. Let's get back to this so-called...
My voice is going to sound terrible on this podcast because
I'm sure.
I'm heated on this.
I like the emotion. I do.
I'm just, because we discuss even when we're not on the podcast, but I'm just so angry at where the Republican Party has gone.
Well, it is. Hopefully, they're going to be lemmings following their leader off.
Did you see when Marjorie Taylor Greene had the gavel the other day?
Oh, that makes me
To
sick.
be Speaker Pro Tempore, and she asked everybody to follow the decorum of the House, and literally there was audible laughter. You don't hear much laughter on C-SPAN.
She can't spell the
From the Democrat and the Republican sides of just how not self-aware this was for her to be saying that people should be following the decorum of the House.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see that if the Senate, which I do believe
The Senate's going to pass
both
it.
leaders can pass it, but the
There's
key
enough
is
serious people in the Senate. They're going to pass
not to add amendments to it. That has to go back to the House.
I don't think they will.
Hopefully it's clean. Just pass the damn thing.
Yeah.
You
You can come at all this again in January when it expires. But for now, just pass the damn thing. And I think they will in the Senate. I have faith.
Well, let's look at this scenario. All right. Say what I am thinking in terms of a DeSantis eking out a win for the Republican nomination.
Okay.
If he does. Now, my opinion is that Trump will run as a third-party candidate. I think he's got the money.
I think he will only to keep himself out of jail because he thinks this is his get out of jail free card.
But my opinion is and the scary part, you'll have false flag candidates like quasi-independents running too. This could be a four-person race, and a president could be elected with 30% in something like that, which would be horrific for this country. And I'm a little worried.
Who would that be?
I think there are a number of billionaires who would back somebody to make sure that Biden wasn't reelected, number one, and somebody would run as an independent. I read in this current week magazine, that there was a move by the person who was supporting or being the financial supporter of Justice Thomas.
Yeah, Crow or whatever his name is.
Crow was going to put money behind a Joe Manchin candidate as an independent. Now, that would be devastating for the Democratic Party. But if you had a Donald Trump on the other extreme running, that would be devastating to DeSantis. It would be a crapshoot, and it would make for one.
It really would be.
And that scenario, I'm not saying the scenario is going to play out, but it could play out.
Well, the horrible thing in that scenario, just playing it out, thinking about it, I think that scenario ultimately gets you to a spot where the House of Representatives chooses between the top three finishers, which is what the Constitution lays out, if nobody gets 270 electoral votes.
Wow. Well, that's going to be interesting to see.
And the House of Representatives in that case votes by state. So it would matter how many state delegations in the House of Representatives are controlled by supporters of each person. So let's say that scenario you just played out. So you have DeSantis as the Republican nominee, right? Biden as the Democratic nominee, Trump as his own, and Manchin as his own. Let's say Election Day comes, it all plays out. Probably DeSantis, this is in no particular order, DeSantis, Biden, and Trump emerge as the three with the most electoral votes in that scenario. Mm-hmm. Which means Manchin is dropped out. That's what the Constitution says. So then it's up to the House of Representatives, and it would be the new House of Representatives that's elected in 2024, to choose between those three people. And in that scenario, New Jersey's delegation gets one vote. New York's delegation gets one vote. They have to come to a consensus, the state delegation. And you have to win a majority of state delegations to become president in that scenario. Who emerges from that?
I wouldn't even want to read those tea leaves. But now,
right, because Biden would get all the Democratic-leaning delegations, but that probably wouldn't be a majority.
My opinion is that Manchin, I don't know if Manchin would even do this, but it was
Right.
mentioned as that independent candidate, that this man Crow would.
But that would be the scenario that plays out. In
Well,
that case.
I'd rather that scenario than having it go to the Supreme Court. You know, unless that.
No, there's no role spelled out for the Supreme Court in elections.
I thought that in 2000.
That was a legal challenge about the legality
About
of
Florida.
Ongoing recounts.
Yep. But, so it
That was not to decide the election.
We'll have
that
it-
was to decide whether the recounts continued.
Joe, we'll have a new president sometime in March then.
The Supreme Court did not elect George W. Bush. The people of Florida did by a
Yes.
margin of whatever it was.
5-4. The Supreme Court was 5-4.
Well, that was the Supreme Court, but that was to decide that the recounts could no longer legally continue.
And-
the people of Florida elected George W. Bush.
And sadly,
In every single recount, George W. Bush was in the lead.
I didn't vote for Gore.
Al
I
Gore
voted
never
for
took
Ralph Nader.
Al Gore never took the lead in a single recount.
No, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. But there was enough
As much as the margin narrowed,
There was enough controversy with those hanging chads. You know, like honestly, it
in every recount, George W. Bush emerged as the winner.
He was the president. I totally agree. And and though I did not vote for him, and I wasn't a fan of Al Gore, I applaud his patriotism and basically conceding and doing it gracefully, because he did just that. And
Yeah, remember those days? When
No,
people
I
conceded
like to
gracefully.
Yeah.
We're covering the 2008 election tomorrow in my U.S. History 2 classes. That's where I end the year. It's the 2008 election. Barack Obama against John McCain.
Another gracious gentleman, a patriot, John McCain. He's rolling over in his grave right now.
Oh, he's. I don't even have a verb for what he's probably done in his grave.
Yeah, it's sad.
Not only the Republican Party in general, but his old little toady, Lindsey Graham.
Oh, you mean the enemy of Russia, who's on their most wanted list?
Yeah, well.
That was funny.
John McCain was on that list.
Oh, of course, rightfully so.
was proud of it.
Yeah. But Joe, to be continued. I got a feeling that we're gonna see some movement with indictments. You know, not only in
I think
Georgia.
Fannie Willis is coming. in
She's
Georgia.
coming. She'll come in at some point in
the summer.
mid-July.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the
I don't know
special
about the
prosecutor.
special counsel because I don't know if this is new evidence that just came in and now this is going to spur a whole new branch of an
See,
investigation.
that's why I think
that might delay things. I think he was close to wrapping up his case, so I don't know if this new evidence about a recording, if that's something he's had and we're just learning about, and it's part of something he was already wrapping up, or if this is something that just came to light to him and now it's going to disseminate to a new.
You know what? He's kept
investigation.
everything so close to the
Because
vest.
federal guidelines generally are you don't bring a case until it's all buttoned up and ready.
Every I is dotted, every T. And by the way, he
So
has
if
to
this is
submit
something
this.
new that spurs new stuff, that's going to delay things.
But whatever he does, he has to basically get the approval of Merrick Garland to say yay and nay on proceeding.
I'm curious about that because I think Merrick Garland might try to take a very hands-off approach. Say, this was put in the hands of the special prosecutor. It's completely up to him. Just like I left it completely up to Jack Durham, what he put out in his report at the end of his investigation.
Which is
Merrick Garland didn't do anything to the
Well,
Durham report.
I hope that
He said, okay,
I
that
hope
was
that's
his
the case.
investigation. He concluded it. We're putting it out there, and that's the end of that.
If this
He launched the two prosecutions he thought were justified. Neither of them resulted in convictions. And we're not going to take any further action. I didn't interfere with this at all. I let it play out, and that's that. I'm curious if Merrick Garland takes the exact same approach with Jack Smith that he did with Durham, which is to say, look, he was appointed. This was completely his thing. He is an independent prosecutor, and he's going to make the decisions that he makes. And I'm not going to say anything one way or the other to try to at least retain that idea that, Merrick Garland, who does have a decent reputation for being nonpartisan
Fair.
and fair.
Would have made a good Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, well, that was Mitch McConnell. But if he does that, to say I didn't have any role in this at all, because he is a political appointee, Merrick Garland.
Yep.
Whereas Smith is an independent prosecutor appointed by the Justice Department. So he could at least say, look, I didn't have any, there wasn't any political influence here.
I think you're
Jack
right.
Smith drew his conclusions.
I-
He did his investigation, just like Durham did, and we're going to let it play out.
I hope that that's right, but I would.
It won't make a difference again.
No.
Trump supporters,
No.
they'll say, well, Merrick
it was-
Garland and all are all
of course.
liberal, but at least it'll be able to have that appearance that he wasn't, as a political appointee, directly involved here.
You know, I think Donald Trump is shaking in his boots.
Well, I think so, too.
At the visage of Jack Smith. Have you ever seen those publicity pictures when he was sitting on the court in The Hague? He's got this big beard. He's got this stern look. If this guy was dogging me legally, I would basically cop to anything to get for a plea.
Well, Trump was terrified of Robert Mueller. Look what lengths his legal team went to prevent him from ever answering a single question from Robert Mueller, because they knew it would be the end of him.
Oh, it would be the end of him. He'll never. Well, if he's forced to go before.
I know a lot of people were
grand jury-
disappointed in Mueller in the end, but
Yes, I was.
you know,
I was very disappointed. Although, if you read,
there's only so much he could do to
you
compel
read the
testimony.
480-page Mueller report. There's such damning evidence in
Oh, I
there.
know.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Anybody that say, I mean, Trump immediately jumped on the bandwagon. I've been vindicated.
Well, he wasn't vindicated
He
by any
wasn't.
means.
He wasn't vindicated. Plain and simple. And I don't understand.
The Mueller report said there are significant things we found here that are problematic, but we are not making a decision on whether to charge or not.
No, because
this was a fact-finding mission.
He did not believe that you could charge a sitting president,
Right.
which I think is tremendously bogus.
Yeah,
you know, I don't think that should be
I
tested.
know that's Justice Department policy, but
Yeah. I mean, it's
could
policy.
certainly be challenged
It's
in
not,
court.
It's
It's
it
not-
could be.
it's not established law.
No, you know, it's.
I
an
mean,
interesting
I
thing.
shared some disappointment in the end of Mueller, but I mean, again, having read his report, it certainly did not vindicate Donald Trump.
Look at
Look how many convictions he got.
yeah. I mean, look at how
For
many
Trump supporters
Look
who
at how
said-
many pardons that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's a pardon is an acknowledgement that a crime was committed that you had to be pardoned from. Look at Durham, who Trump and his people hyped up that this was going to bring down all the Democrats, and it didn't bring down anybody. Nobody was successfully prosecuted by Durham.
By the way, concurrently, there's going to be another trial that's going on shortly, and that's the architect of Trump's campaign, Bannon. Bannon basically goes to court in New York, I guess this fall, early in the fall, and everybody else that was tried there, all his co-conspirators,
Bannon's already been convicted
they've
of
been
felonies.
convicted. They've been convicted. So I would assume
He's appealing, and he hasn't been sent to prison yet, but he's already been convicted of felonies.
Yeah.
Steve Bannon. So.
But he was also pardoned by Donald Trump. So, but this case is a different case. It's state case.
Yeah.
And that should be interesting to see how that plays out. I hope it occupies his time because you'll know we'll be involved with ultimately Trump's campaign at some way, shape, or form. But now that they don't have their Gestapo, it seems like
The Gestapo or the Gazpacho police, as
I'm talking about
as
the
Marjorie
Oath
Taylor
Keepers
Greene
or
is very worried about.
or the Proud Boys.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think those sentences were justified, and they're not going to get
They
overturned.
should have been longer.
Well, 18 years is a long one.
It is, but the judge
Well-
said this was domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
So why he didn't just go with the maximum that the prosecutors were asking for, I don't really understand. But that's judge's discretion. It is what it is. But it was a long sentence.
And
thank God. But
first time that they've used the count, and it was
Right.
successful. So
So-
the State Department is to be applauded for that.
we just heard the bell. If you're out there in listener world, you know that means I have another class coming in. This is the reality of how we record our podcast. So just quickly, Bill, your last thoughts here.
Well, it's sort of depressing, the previous conversation, to think about all these horrible possibilities. Let's pray for the Republic let's go Yankees, let's go Mets.
We should just end every episode from now on with "Let's go Yankees, let's go Mets," even if it's not baseball season. The other thing I want to point out just really quickly is we are coming to the end of a school year. You are planning to retire from
Yes, but I'm not
the
going to
school.
retire from Wigs for Wigs.
And that's what I wanted to get out there.
Joe, as Rick,
Bill will not be with me probably in the classroom doing these
I'll do it by Zoom.
improvise, but that might actually give us more freedom that we'll do it by Zoom. It could be at different times.
I'll leave you with this: the line that Rick said to Louis in Casablanca. This is the start of a beautiful relationship.
So, I don't know if we'll record another one here at the end of the school year. We have exams coming up. That's a busy time of year, but this has been great. These last year plus that we've been recording these are our random free periods.
And this is a tease. Look for some great guests coming into the fall, because I have some
There you go.
ideas.
When we kick off season 3, I mean, we're still in season 2 here of Wigs for Wigs. But when we kick off season 3 in the fall, we might have some exciting stuff coming for you all. So thank you all again for listening. Please as always, reach out to us with your thoughts and your questions. We can be reached always at Wigs for Wigs. That is WIGSFORWHIGS @gmail.com. We love hearing from you. We'll share your questions or thoughts on a future episode. So let us know. And we'll see you again soon on another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Take care, everybody.